Today on Locked On Red Wings, Larkin is out for 2 weeks with an injury, and with the deadline approaching, should the Red Wings make a move for a forward?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the Daily J, a WWJ news radio podcast. Oh, and heads up, Scotty, a rare crossover event. My this is Locked On Red Wings, my Daily J podcast. I do one episode a week this Tuesday talking about the Red Wings.
Wow. Look at you.
Stay tuned for the Tuesday episode. I talked to Max Boltman and I talked to Ken Cal for the episode on the Daily J. About the return of relevancy to the Detroit Red Wings ahead of the deadline here. And a little bit more for a casual listen, but still a good listen nonetheless. I'm excited to send that to you guys. It'll be this evening by the time you're listening. This is the Tuesday episode of Locked On Red Wings.
That'll be cool.
I wanted to plug myself there, get you guys a listens, because the more you listen to that, the more secure my job is. So please. So, Scotty, got to let the people know that today's episode, of course, is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKDOWNNHL to get up to $100 matched on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Scotty, unfortunately, the news broke this afternoon. Was it late morning, early afternoon?
Yeah.
We knew
like
Dylan Larkin had
10:30,
missed.
11.
We knew Dylan Larkin had missed a little bit of the game at the end of the game against the Panthers. We knew he had gotten a penalty, a 2-minute minor, but then he had gone to the dressing room from the penalty box and somebody else had served. I was hopeful that perhaps he had gotten a 10-minute misconduct like Fabry and Woolman, or that it was just they didn't want to play him when the game was getting chippy. So I didn't want to raise any flags until we heard more after practice. And unfortunately, you saw during practice, Joe Veleno was taking reps on the top line, and then Derek Lalonde drops the bomb in the media availability afterwards that he's out for at least 2 weeks. And this is the heart and soul of the team. He's a point per game player for the third year in a row. I think 54 points in 55 games. He's on pace for 30 goals. And now for the second time this season, he's going to miss a chunk of games. And probably at the most important crossroads of the season, the beginning of the week leading into the trade deadline. So my question for you, one, obviously, how does this affect the Red Wings' outlook as a season? And how does this, do you think, if any, affect their approach to the trade deadline?
Yeah, this could not be worse timing. I think I want to start off with that. This is, maybe the most critical 2 weeks. We'll see how the rest of the season pans out. Maybe the last 2 weeks of the season, there's a lot of battles going on if the standings get tight. But pretty comfortably the biggest 2 weeks of the season up to this point. And that obviously sucks to lose your best player like that. So, and in terms of how it'll affect the Wings, I do like Joe Veleno getting a look there. I'm sure as the week goes along and when we, preview Wednesday's game, we'll talk a lot more about like lineup outlook and stuff. But yeah, the effect, we've talked about it a lot, and I guess that's a transition to the trade question, right? We've talked about how this team was looking for a top six, maybe winger or, forward, but like somebody that they can slot into the wing in that top six, because the Wings had 5 of their 6 top 6 forwards kind of solidified, and they've kind of been playing ring around the rosy with the last one. And now that conversation is, dare I say, vastly different, right? Now you're in a position where, okay, well, now for the next 2 weeks, it could be worse, right? He could be out for, I guess we'll count our blessings that it's only a few weeks, at least at the time being. But that is, again, it's a critical two week stretch here. And I think that you're now in a position where the Wings could look around and go, okay, well, why not go get a center, right? Why not go get a center? And that conversation not only starts with the Larkin injury, but even when Larkin comes back, okay, you go get a center. Great. Then whoever you get, if it's a top 6 caliber center, can slide down and be 2C when Larkin comes back. And Comfer has proven that he can kind of play anywhere. Like, you're not going to not make a deal for a center because, oh, well, then where does JT Comfer play in 2 weeks? Like, I love Comfer more than anybody, but he is versatile enough to play anywhere, or it could just be your 3C, and there you go. Like, I think that that angle of it specifically, about what position in the forward group you were going to target kind of changes, dare I say, dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I mean, one, obviously, God, I feel so bad for Larkin. I feel like we say that every time he gets banged up. I mean, this guy just cannot stay healthy, and that's through no fault of his own. I'm not going to place the blame on a guy who's getting banged up. It's the same thing with Fabry, right? Like, it's just bad luck to a certain extent that this injury would happen. Like, on what it's going to sound weird. Like, the silver lining here is it's a lower body injury. It's not like a head or neck issue, which has been the recurring problem. So like maybe he tweaked a groin, which if he just tweaked it 2 weeks, he should be good to go. You would hope. But I just feel bad. This guy cannot stay healthy. And I feel bad for the Red Wings because they need a heart and soul guy like Dylan Larkin to be in the lineup. As far as your comments regarding the trade deadline, I'm not really versed in the market for a center right now at the trade deadline. I feel like those are so hard to come by.
Yeah.
Because they're the most, we talk about it. They're probably that and goalie are the most important positions in hockey because centers have to do everything. So if you're going to pay for a center at the trade deadline, you're going to be, especially a 1C or if you want to say 2C.
For sure. Yeah.
Like
there's not going to be too many 1Cs out there. That wasn't my implication.
No, I know. Is it still too late to get Elias Pettersson? Like, I know he just signed. Can we still go get him? But
post-extension trade, that'd be kind of wild.
I do think it really emphasizes the need for a forward. Like, we were going into the trade deadline, like we were going to talk this week about acquiring a forward, another top 6 winger to complement the top 6. Because you have a rotation of Rasmussen, Perron, Fabry, and none of them can kind of secure that spot because honestly, none of them at this point in their careers are top 6 caliber wingers. So I was of the mindset that while it wasn't the biggest need, I think we were in agreement that defense is probably the biggest need for the team at the deadline. If they're going to acquire anyone, again, I'd be content with them staying pat, given where this team's at on the coming up. I don't want to burn through all your assets for a rental. But if they're going to acquire somebody, the biggest need was going to be defense. But top 6 winger was, for me, number 2 on that list. And I think losing Larkin for 2 weeks in a stretch where you're going to go play 4 road games. You're at Colorado tomorrow. You're at Arizona on Friday. You have Vegas the day after that. So back-to-backs. And you're at Buffalo to finish off the road trip. I mean, that's a tough road swing. And now you're going to be missing your biggest point contributor. So I think this just emphasizes the need to acquire somebody. But at the same time, I wouldn't get so desperate as to sell the farm on this season because your window is just cracking open, just beginning 100%. To crack open. I'm not trading Casper or Danielson or anyone unless it's a player that you can have here long-term. And I mean, that's what we'll talk about in segment 2. The last thing I want to say in regards to, you mentioned Joe Veleno. Joe Veleno's had chances at the top line and in the top 6. And while I have absolutely no qualm with him getting another shot in that role, because, I mean, I love Joey V. I love me some Joey Poison, as they've been calling him this season. I know that he's not a 1C. I know he's never going to be a 1C in the NHL. Sure. He'll probably max out at like a 3C, which is perfectly fine and acceptable. I think the main reason that they've put Joe Veleno on that top line with Dylan or in place of Dylan Larkin instead of Comfort or Comp is the speed element. You talk about centers who have speed that can drive plays, get into the offensive zone, win those corner battles to set up guys like DeBrincat and Kane. It's Joe Veleno. It's the same reason why Joe Veleno was centering those two when Comfort and Larkin were out in December. Now, we know the results were kind of middling at best back when that was the case in December, but who else are you going to have center those guys? So while it is a little bit of a mix of like, you need Joey Poison to center those two guys out of just necessity because it couldn't be the other two, he's also at the same time the best fit because that line needs speed, and Joe Veleno has two-way speed, and he's gonna replace Larkin in that category. Now, no one's gonna replace Larkin's goal scoring or Larkin's just hockey sense in that regard, but Veleno's probably the closest thing you have to replacing that at the moment. So I'm happy Veleno's getting the shot, but I just also understand that it's not like he's gonna reveal himself as a future 1C for the franchise.
Obviously not. Yeah.
On that note, I think we probably move on to segment 2 and 3 here, where we talk about our potential fits. I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the names of the guys that we want to fit. And so the question is going to be, with the Red Wings heading into the trade deadline, do one of Jake Guentzel, Pavel Buchnevich, or Vladimir Tarasenko fit as a top 6 winger for the Detroit Red Wings as the playoff push continues. So stay tuned to those conversations in segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. It's well past the halfway point of the NHL season, and despite a Dylan Larkin injury and back-to-back losses, the Red Wings are still 6 points up on the wild card, still tied for first wild card. So, guys, the sky is not falling. The outlook is still pretty good. And once Larkin comes back, it'll look even better. And regardless of where they are in those current standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is the number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Patrick Kane, Alex DeBrincat, and hey, Joe Veleno will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Red Wings fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to $100 matched on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. And that's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, one more thing on the Larkin thing I just want to mention, real briefly, is this is a good opportunity for the depth to show its mettle. Like, this is something that we have been talking about all season long, about how good this team's depth is, especially on the forward core. It's going to be needed more than ever, like we said, crossroads of the season in this 2-week span.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's something we've been talking about since the summer. It's like, when people get hurt, you want organizational depth. It's good. And, it's unfortunate that we have to prove that, but here we are. Hey,
it happens. Injuries happen, and sometimes they happen in unfortunate times, but the Detroit Red Wings, like I said, this is a good opportunity for the Red Wings to show that they're not one player deep, and I know they aren't. So I think Patrick Kane is going to step up big time, but that's a conversation for another day. Scotty, there are 3 forwards, and this isn't going to surprise anyone who's paid attention to national media. Elliot Friedman, Jeff Merrick have talked about it on 32 Thoughts. 3 forwards, 3 wingers in particular, that I think the Red Wings should target for the trade deadline if they want to buy. Of course, given you don't want to sell the farm again. That's just the preface. That's the context. But if you have an opportunity to acquire these for a fair price, I would be looking at Jake Guentzel, Pavel Buchnevich, and Vladimir Tarasenko. And when it comes to these 3 guys, situations similar but different in different nuances. Guys at different stages of their career, guys on different types of contracts, and guys that are just maybe looking to have a shot at winning the Stanley Cup on teams that aren't already. I don't want to go through each individual player and list off why or why not like we normally would do. I want to ask you, Scotty, give me your ranking of who of top most wanted to least wanted of these 3. Where would you rank them, and then go through the reasoning as to why, just straight up?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the one that I am the position that I'm the most passionate about of those 3 is Guentzel at the top. I mean, Tarasenko, like all 3 of these guys, if it was announced tomorrow that they were added, we would celebrate the acquisition, assuming we didn't give up an arm and a leg for it, right? So we're just splitting hairs here between 3 of the top forwards on the market here, but Guentzel's had a really, really great season. And I think when it comes to just like fit, which I know is kind of like a hot button phrase to use sometimes, but I do think that fit is really important with him. And I think that he gives you a little bit of speed. Obviously, I don't know, maybe not the biggest plus defender in the world, but I think that there is and just like production, he's produced, straight up. If you just look at, points, goals, whatever, he's going to be the highest. Well, I think goals actually, Buchnevich has the most of those 3. But regardless, like point production, I mean, almost a point a game player, is a point a game player, over a point a game player. There you go. Almost got there. And yeah, man, like I think that my most passionate one is just him being at the top. I think he's a really good fit. I think you can kind of move him around in terms of, again, like we're trying to find that fit in the top 6 when it comes to wingers. And I think that he is a guy that can fit in with really anybody you mix and match him with. Another guy that is not afraid to pass the puck, which is obviously really important to the success of this hockey team. Not that any of these guys are, but I think that he is probably at the top of my list. I guess, honestly, I think my list would probably be in order of the names that you have written down here on the sheet. It's probably Guentzel, Buchnevich, Tarasenko. And yeah, really the Buchnevich and Tarasenko are pretty close with me. I think my biggest one is just, I think of those 3, Guentzel's probably at the top. Also just like remaining, I don't know. I mean, rental type of situation as well. So return might not be an arm and a leg either.
Yeah, I think for me, I think I might be leaning more towards Buchnevich as one rather than Guentzel or Tarasenko. And I think the main reason why I may be leaning Buchnevich over Guentzel is mainly just because Buchnevich has another year left on his contract. They're 28 years. He's 28 years old. Guentzel's 29. It will cost a lot more. But I'm looking at this from a situation where I don't want the Red Wings to just go out there. Like, if you're going to acquire a Guentzel, you're going to want to be able to extend him. And
For sure.
And Elliot Friedman mentioned on the 32 Thoughts podcast that when it comes to Guentzel, Steve Yzerman, and not just Guentzel in general, but Yzerman is well known for not wanting to give out max length contracts. Like,
sure.
If you sign him or extend him, you're not want to give him 8 years. And I know Guentzel at this stage of his career, 29, he's going to want a max length contract. So if Steve Yzerman can acquire him, which is going to cost you a lot of money, and mind you, this is a guy who's 24 goals, 48 points in 58 games played. He's injured. I'm sorry, that's Buchnevich. Correction. He has 52 points in 50 games played, 22 goals, 30 assists. He's had a 40-goal season under his belt. He had 36 last year in 78 games. Like, this is a guy who in your top 6, like, he can be top line forward. He can also be your second line forward too. Yeah. But because of the fact that it's not a guarantee you extend him unless you give him a max deal, which Steve Yzerman is not going to want to do at 29 going into 30 years old, you know, you wonder if maybe he'll go to somebody like Pavel Buchnevich, who has one more year left on his contract after this season at $5.8 million. It gives Yzerman a little bit of time to decide if this is a guy you want to extend. But to your point, because he's got a little bit more term, you're going to have to give up more pieces to acquire him. But the Red Wings, this is the nice part about having guys in the cabinet, right? Like, I love Nate Danielson. I love Marco Kasper. I love Axel Sandin Pellikka, William Wallander, Jonathan Berggren. I love all those guys. But you cannot be afraid to move those pieces for guys who move your timeline up. And a guy like Buchnevich, who's on pace, you know, for a great season. Both Guentzel and Buchnevich are relative. They're Corsi for relative per 60, which is a long mouthful, but basically they're both heavily in the positive, which means when they're on the ice, the team produces more shot attempts because of them. Like, those are guys that help speed up your timeline, and they're in the primes of their career right now. So you cannot be afraid to move your pieces for guys like that. But at the same time, like I said in segment 1, you don't want to sell the farm either. So you're very careful in this position right now, where if you get these guys, you want to be able to extend them, because that way, if you move pieces that you've collected, these coveted pieces, at least it's worth its weight in gold. That's why Guentzel kind of scares me a little bit, because what if you trade for him and you can't get him extended? At least with
what if, I mean, I would argue that that risk reward with Buchnevich is higher, because you're going to be giving up more because he's not a rental. And I understand you give him for one extra season, but okay, you can't extend him either, right? Like, you're talking about a 28 versus 29-year-old. So Buchnevich is just literally in the same position that Guentzel was a year ago, right? Like, see, it's copy and paste, but you'd be giving up more to get him. And then if you can't extend him as well, then yes, you get him for next season, which is obviously a huge plus. But I guess my point is, if you can't get any of these guys long term, it's going to bite you. Like, that mindset doesn't affect who I have ranked higher on here, because to me, if you don't re-sign or don't extend any of them, then you're SOL, right? Then you're kind of screwed. So like I understand your sentiment, and obviously there's a little bit more of a safety net because he's not just a rental, but like that conversation is just going to exactly copy and paste itself 12 months from now. And if you can't extend him, then you gave up even more to get somebody who you're not going to be able to extend. Now, if you win a cup next year, then who cares? And it's all worth it, and you did it, and congratulations. But like, if you know what I mean, like it really is just kind of the same exact situation, just a year before what Guentzel is now.
No, you are 100% correct. Buchnevich is the same situation as Guentzel, just lagged by a year. And it's, I think, let me be clear, because I'm splitting hairs in my rankings. That's the only reason why I'm ranking Buchnevich over Guentzel. In all reality, I want both of these guys, and I want them extended. It's just that gamble of if you can or not, and how long, if they'll take less than a max 7-8 year deal. That is going to honestly, difference.
That part right there probably determines the most is Yzerman's confidence in extending them, or confidence in AAV or price that they're going to want in an extension.
Well, and that's exactly the thing, though, too, is Larkin. Yzerman's not going to make a trade for a guy he doesn't think is going to sign here. I don't think. He's not going to make a trade for Buchnevich or Guentzel if there's not a conversation that they're pretty confident that they want to be married together long term. Like, that's going to be part of the trade negotiation. So in reality, DeBrincat, exactly. A lot of my worries are probably non-existent if the trade even happens in the first place. And that's why, like I say, I don't want to sell the farm for a rental. If you can sell the farm, I'm not saying like sell the entire farm before people come attack me, but if you can trade a Jonathan Berggren and maybe one, if you have to move a better tier prospect or a first round pick for a Guentzel or a Buchnevich, which I think you probably will, it'll be in return for a guy who's going to be here for 4 or 5+ years and going to help you produce now. And that's long-term sustainability. That is still long-term sustainability. So I think that's the only situation where I'm comfortable trading your future assets away for a guy who will help you now and is young enough to help you in the immediate future as well. Not comfortable doing it for someone like Vladimir Tarasenko, who I will talk about in segment 3.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. I guess my mindset is more, if the thought is to extend them anyway, then get the guy who's going to cost less in a trade, which is the rental over a year and a half.
Yeah,
right.
That's fair. I think that's
both fair. Of them are. If the thought process is, you are only going to bring someone in to extend them, then bring in the cheaper trade option.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to head to segment 3, and when we come back, we'll talk about Vladimir Tarasenko. So stay tuned to that on Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about eBay Motors. Scotty loves this one. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, Scotty, you're burning what?
Rubber, not cash, baby.
Heck yeah. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are done splitting hairs between Buchnevich and Guentzel, two players that we would love here at our winged wheel.
For sure.
We're going to move on to specifically Vladimir Tarasenko. And I know, Scotty, you already kind of said your piece on that, but I was so focused on the two guys who are much younger and in better positions than Tarasenko that I kind of neglected to mention him. And I would still take Vladimir Tarasenko. He's on an expiring deal as well. I can't remember exactly who said it, but somebody kind of said he is the consolation prize on people who whiff on a Buchnevich and Guentzel. And I think I agree with that. He's 32 years old. He's on a 1-year deal with a full no trade clause, $5 million, which means nothing for the Detroit Red Wings, who would be paying nothing at the end of the year. He's not having a bad season by any stretch of the imagination. He's got 41 points at 57 games played, but it's just definitely a bit of a slower pace than your Guentzel and your Buchnevich. I think that he could slot in your top 6 and be an upgrade over the guys that you already have. But I would not be comfortable. He's the guy I'd be comfortable giving up the assets for the most of the 2 other guys, because I don't think he is a long-term solution at 32 years old on that top 6, because he's already kind of, we're talking about a 3-year difference, right? Like Guentzel's 29, Tarasenko's 32, but that 3-year difference is the difference between being in your prime right now and being at the twilight of your prime for a guy who has had a pretty lengthy injury history. So, well, if you're the Detroit Red Wings and you want to give yourself a boost going into the playoffs right now and you want a rental, I think Tarasenko is that rental. But he's a guy who I would be the least comfortable giving up assets for. But at the same time, because of that rental mentality, I think you're going to have to give up the least to acquire at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. I think that is the reason why I didn't just have him, off on an island at the very bottom of my list, was because, it's trade conversations are always so fascinating because there is so much to weigh, right? I mean, you better player, pay more. But the biggest thing that I really drive home every single trade deadline in hockey, and I do it a lot in baseball season, is like team control determines value so much more than people realize. And if you can, comparing just like the production of 2 players does not do trade packages justice. Like, you really have to look at team control and how much team control is left, and then obviously in a lot of these cases today, like extension possibilities and whatnot. And so I completely agree with you. I think that's why, again, he was relatively still close to the pack. And I kind of said Buchnevich and Tarasenko were similar in terms of my rankings, just because it's different mindsets, right? Buchnevich is like you said, a year and a half, and you're getting a guy who you could extend longer term, even beyond a year and a half. Whereas Tarasenko is, I think, maybe not like 100% strictly a rental. Maybe he's an extension, like a short term, like he's a trade for, and then you give him a year or 2 after that. But he's certainly not the longer term type of extension you'd want to look out for if you got any of the first 2 guys we've talked about. So yeah, but again, to your point, as I again continue to reiterate, team control matters a lot with player value. And so the fact that he would be more of an extension or more of a rental, I think I agree with you. He would be pretty comfortably the least amount of assets to get him as well.
Yeah, and I would be a little bit careful with Tarasenko too. I'm not trying to downplay how good of a hockey player is, and I do think he would be an upgrade on this roster over some of the guys that we have at wing. He, on a bad Senators team, is a minus 4.01 relative Corsi per 60, which means that when he's on the ice, they're averaging 4 less shot attempts for than against. Their shot share is 4 against, essentially, per 60 minutes when he is on the ice versus when he is off. And that's not a good sign for a once dominant player on an already pretty bad hockey team that's already struggling. And obviously, it's a team game, and Corsi also is that's what the relative stat is for, right? Is trying to figure out this player's individual impact. And it's just one of those things that kind of gives me pause. His point production is fine. Like, I know he's a little bit older and he's had injury history. His point production is fine for a rental, but I don't think Red Wings would extend him. And I'm not necessarily, and maybe this is me being arrogant, I'm not necessarily interested in extending Vladimir Tarasenko. So if you're going to bring him in and a rental status, it would just be hopefully for a lot less than you would get a guy like Guentzel or Buchnevich, who I would want here long term.
Sure. I still think there would be a lot of conversations about like 1 and 2 year extensions. I mean, with the production he's had this year, and again, the hole that we continue to talk about on that 6th spot in the top 6, I don't think that, if he's producing, then like if he's going out there and putting up, just under a point a game pace or something the rest of the way, if he's continuing to producing the way he's produced this year, then the fan base is going to be like, hey, we're going to have a conversation in the summer then about like, do you give him an extra year or 2? Like that. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say like he's 100% not an extension candidate, which again, I guess is a reason why he's a little bit closer to the other 2 for my rankings. But yeah, certainly not the long-term extension that you'd be talking about with the first 2, certainly.
Yeah, and I mean, when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, the answer to all of these would be yes, depending on the price, right? That's the one thing
Yeah.
that we always say every single time we talk about trade proposals is, I mean, there are some times where we're just like, no, I don't want this player. And with Patrick Kane, we saw how that worked
Yeah,
out.
like Patrick Kane.
Right.
It's a good take.
But I would be ecstatic with either of Jake Guentzel or Pavel Buchnevich. And I mean, Guentzel with a 40 goal season under his belt. I mean, that's firepower that would solely benefit the Red Wings style of play as well. I just splitting hairs leaned a little bit more towards Buchnevich, but either way, I'd take either one of them, assuming that the extension's on the table. Vladimir Tarasenko is kind of, like I said, the consolation prize. And honestly, if you miss on Guentzel or Buchnevich, I wouldn't even be upset if you didn't even try for Tarasenko, to be completely honest. But I would also not look the other way if they did acquire him, depending, of course, on the price. So I just want the Red Wings to drum up some excitement come the trade deadline this Friday. So, Scotty, any final thoughts?
Can I give you like a sleeper name that I kind of wouldn't mind at all? He's definitely not like the 1C type or like top line, addition. But I think would be kind of play into the depth really well and give you, I don't know, a little bit of help until Larkin comes back. And then when Larkin does come back, it would be, I don't know, Philly's weird. But if they're serious about trading Lawton, that's a guy that I would absolutely love. He's under contract for like years still, and I think it's only $3 million a year. Like, he is on a super team friendly deal, having a fantastic season, plays two-way hockey on a team that this year is obviously playing much better defense, but before this season wasn't. It kind of seems like perfect Red Wing in his obviously a little bit later years, but I would. That's like a under the radar type of. He's like 29 or 30, by the way. I didn't make it sound like he's like 35. But yeah, that was a guy that the second that those rumors kind of started swirling, that was a guy where I was like, if they're serious about that and they're like, oh, like he's not going to get any better, this is when his value's at its peak or whatnot. Again, doesn't address like the top end, like top line kind of production you want, and I fully understand that, but what a fantastic addition to the middle six that would be.
Yeah, I think he's an interesting name to keep track of for sure. And then also, Scotty, this just in as we're recording, it's gonna be old news by
dude. No, I literally, that's why I made a face while you were talking. I got the notey too. I'm assuming you're talking about Ruff.
Yeah, Lindy Ruff fired by the New Jersey Devils. So that can go one of two ways. Either they're going to get the new coach bump and they're going to launch themselves back in the playoff, or they're just toast. I think probably they're leaning a little bit more towards toast right now and just like saying, oh,
well, I think they're in a position the Wings were in last year where it's like, you better win this last week up until the deadline if you want to not be toast, or else they're going to start selling off pieces. They're young, like their core is going to stay intact, but yeah, I don't know. Pretty interesting situation there for sure.
I mean, the Pens look like they might be sellers. The Caps look like they might be sellers. And the Devils now in a position firing their head coach.
Pens being sellers helps this conversation today.
Well, and what's really interesting too is, and we got to wrap things up, but Crosby coming out and saying like, I like playing with Guentzel, I don't want to see him traded. That complicates things. Dubas is in a weird spot.
All right. We'll take Crosby too.
Yeah, we'll take Crosby.
You've twisted my arm. We'll take both of them.
Right.
We'll have Crosby and Kane on the same team. It'll be fine.
Jesus. Talk about 2010 superstar team.
We have the 2012 All-Star team, man.
Yeah. All right, Scotty. We got to send people off. Let us know what your guys' ranking, or if you don't want them to get any of these guys, or if there's, like Scotty said, a sleeper pick. Let us know your thoughts. Do you want Guentzel, Buchnevich, Tarasenko, or none? In the comments. Scotty, any final thoughts?
We ball, baby.
We ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow. Probably talk defense on Tuesday or Wednesday's episode, rather. So stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.